The night was cold, the ground was wet, and the ruined colony city smelled of smoke and rot. She walked slowly through the broken streets, her body weak, her stomach empty, her wounds aching. She was an alien widow, once proud, now reduced to searching garbage for food. No one cared about her anymore. No neighbors, no family, no soldiers, only silence and fear. She bent down near a trash pile and lifted a piece of torn cloth. Under it she found a piece of bread, old, and covered with dirt. Her eyes burned with hunger. Her hands shook. She reached for it. But before her fingers could close, a growl cut through the night. A wild dog stood there, ribs sharp under its thin skin, eyes glowing with hunger. It bared its teeth, saliva dripping, ready to fight. She pulled the bread close to her chest, whispering to herself, "I need this. Please, I need this." Sheo. Dog lunged forward and she screamed, swinging her arm to push it away. The bread fell to the ground. The dog snapped its jaws. Pain shot through her hand as teeth cut into her skin. She struck the dog with all her weak strength, but her body was tired. The dog scratched at her leg, tearing cloth, tearing skin. Blood ran down her ankle. She stumbled back against a wall. Her breath was fast, her vision blurry. The dog growled again, circling her. She was ready to lose, ready to fall, ready to give up. The world felt heavy, the hunger, the pain, the loneliness, all too heavy. Her eyes closed for a moment, and in that dark silence she thought of her mate. She remembered the last battle, the fire, the screams. The moment she lost everything, she whispered his name, tears sliding down her face. Maybe tonight she would join him. Maybe death was easier than this life. But then, footsteps echoed. Slow, steady, heavy boots on broken stone. The dog's growl changed. It barked once, then backed away. She opened her eyes and saw a tall figure in the shadows. A human carrying a small bag, moving carefully. Her heart jumped in fear. Humans were not friends. They were strangers. Dangerous. Unpredictable. She tried to crawl away, but her leg burned with pain. The human stopped, kneeling down, hands lifted to show no weapon. The dog snarled again, but the man threw a piece of food from his bag. The dog snatched it and ran into the night, leaving silence behind. Now the human looked at her, his eyes calm, his face rough but not cruel. He spoke in a low voice. "You are hurt." She tried to hide her bleeding hand, but he reached into his bag. He pulled out a bandage, clean and white, something rare in this ruined place. She froze, confused, watching him tear cloth into strips. With gentle hands he wrapped her wound, tight enough to stop the blood. Every movement was careful, slow, almost like a ritual. No anger, no cruelty, only strange mercy. She could smell his sweat, his tired breath, but also the bread he carried. Her stomach growled loudly, and she turned her face in shame. The man opened his bag again and pulled out food, a small piece of bread, softer than anything she had seen in weeks. He placed it in front of her, not forcing, just leaving it there. She stared at him, waiting for a trick, waiting for pain, but he only said, "Eat," and leaned back. Her hands shook as she reached out, biting slowly. The bread was dry, but to her it was sweeter than any feast. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she chewed. The human watched quietly, not smiling, not moving, just making sure she was safe. For the first time in many nights she felt something different. Not just hunger, not just fear, but something strange, something almost forgotten. She felt a spark of hope. When she finished eating, her body still weak, she tried to speak. Her voice was dry, broken. Why help me?" The man did not answer right away. His eyes looked far into the dark street. Finally he said, "Because no one helped me once, and I know how it feels." She stared at him, not knowing what to believe. The pain in her hand and leg was still strong, but inside her heart something new stirred. She was not alone in this moment, not tonight. For the first time since her mate died, someone cared if she lived. The wind howled through the ruins, the night full of danger. But in this small corner, in the broken shadow of a wall, an alien, widow and a lone human sat together, both wounded, both hungry, but not alone anymore. The city still hated them. The soldiers still hunted. The gang still ruled. But maybe, just maybe, survival was not impossible. Maybe one human was enough to change her fate, and maybe she was enough to change his. She woke with a start, her breath fast, her heart pounding like a drum. The smell of smoke still hung in the air, but something else was near too. A faint warmth, the soft sound of fire, the soft sound of someone moving. Her eyes opened slowly, and she froze. The human was there, sitting against the wall, his back straight, his face turned to the street. His eyes were half closed, but he did not sleep. He held a long metal pipe across his knees, like a weapon, ready if danger came. Beside him, a small fire glowed inside, a broken can warming the cold night. She sat up fast, wincing as pain ran through her leg. The bandage on her hand was still tight. The bleeding had stopped. Her mind raced. She remembered the dog, the teeth, the moment she thought death was coming. But instead of death, this human had given her food and bound her wounds. Why, she thought, why would he do this? Humans were not known for kindness, at least not to her kind. The war had filled her people with bitter stories. Stories of humans who destroyed, humans who conquered, humans who cared for no one but themselves, and yet, here was one, sitting awake all night to guard her. Her voice shook when she whispered, "Why not leave me? Why not let me die?" The man turned his head slowly, his eyes calm, his face hard but not cruel. "I told you," he said softly. "I know how it feels." She looked away, her pride heavy, her throat dry. The shame of weakness burned inside her chest. But then the fire popped, and the warmth touched her skin. For the first time in many nights, she was not shivering. The human reached into his bag again, pulling out another small piece of food. It was not much, only half a ration bar, cracked and dry. He placed it near her without a word. Her stomach twisted in hunger, but still she hesitated. Was this a trick? Was he fattening her up before betrayal? She looked into his eyes, but they were steady, watching her with quiet patience. Finally, she reached out and took the bar, chewing, slowly. Every bite filled her with warmth but also confusion. When she finished, he spoke again. "What is your name?" She lowered her eyes. She had not spoken her name to anyone since her mate died. Her voice came out like a whisper, broken. "I am Kethra." The human nodded once. "I am Daniel." Kethra studied him. This strange man who risked his food and his safety. He was scarred, his face marked by old battles, his clothes torn from long days of survival. But his eyes were alive, sharp, carrying a quiet pain that matched her own. She felt the weight of silence between them, heavy but not empty. Outside, the night was still dangerous. Voices of gangs carried faintly through the ruins. Daniel leaned forward, throwing dirt on the fire until it died down. Darkness filled the shelter, but it was safer now. Hidden, unseen, he whispered, "Rest. I will keep watch." She wanted to argue, to say she could watch too, but her body betrayed her, her eyes heavy, her limbs weak. She lay back against the wall, listening to the steady sound of his breathing. For the first time since the war, she slept without fear. When morning came, the light was gray, cutting through cracks in the broken roof. Kethra opened her eyes and found Daniel still awake, his weapon ready. Her chest tightened with something she did not understand. This human had guarded her all night without asking anything in return. She tested her leg, pain still sharp but less than before. Daniel noticed and asked, "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly, though she was not sure. "Good," he said. "We cannot stay here. Soldiers pass through this district often." Fear ran through her body at the word soldiers. She remembered their cruelty, the way they burned her village, the way they killed her mate. Her hands shook, and she whispered, "If they find me, they will kill me." Daniel's voice was calm but firm. "Then we make sure they do not find you." She stared at him, her throat dry. "Why help me? You owe me nothing." His answer was simple but heavy. Because I could not save my people, but maybe I can save you. Her chest ached at those words. She saw in him the same loneliness that lived in her. 2 broken lives, crushed by war, still choosing to stand. Her eyes filled with tears, though she quickly wiped them away as they stepped out into the ruined street. The morning was silent. Ash drifted in the air like gray snow. The city was dying, but in its broken heart walked 2 souls who refused to give up. She limped forward beside the human, uncertain, afraid, but no longer alone. Somewhere deep inside, Kethra felt a seed she thought was long dead. It was not trust, not yet, but it was the beginning of it. And in that fragile beginning there was also something more powerful, the first spark of hope. The ruined colony looked empty, but every corner hid danger. The wind carried dust across broken streets, whispering through shattered windows. Kethra limped beside Daniel, her body weak, her mind torn between fear and curiosity. Why did this human stay with her? Why risk his life? Why not leave her behind? Daniel moved carefully, his eyes scanning alleys, his hand tight on his pipe weapon. He knew this place better than she did. He stepped where the ground was quiet. He stopped often, listening, waiting, always alert. Kethra realized he was not just protecting himself, he was protecting her too. They turned down a narrow path between fallen buildings. Daniel raised a hand, telling her to stop. Voices drifted from ahead, harsh and angry, the sound of a gang. Kethra's heart raced. Memories of capture and cruelty filled her mind. Daniel pointed to a broken door and they slipped inside a ruined warehouse. It was dark, the air thick with dust, the smell of rust and old oil. He guided her deeper, past piles of metal and shattered machines. Finally, he stopped at a hidden corner covered with sheets of scrap. He pulled the sheets aside, revealing a small shelter inside. Blankets, a few boxes, a hidden fire pit, and food wrapped carefully. "This is my place," Daniel whispered. "No one comes here." Kethra looked around, stunned. She had not seen such safety since the war. He gave her a blanket and helped her sit. The pain in her leg was sharp, but the ground was soft compared to the streets. She held the fabric tight, warmth spreading through her cold hands. Daniel lit a small fire in the pit, its glow faint but comforting. For a long time neither spoke. Only the crackle of fire filled the silence. Finally, Daniel said, "You should rest, tomorrow will be harder." Kethra looked at him, her voice low. "Why do you keep me here? Why share your food?" Daniel's face was shadowed by the firelight, his eyes tired. "Because I could not save my squad." Kethra tilted her head, unsure. "Your squad?" He nodded, his jaw tight. "Soldiers, friends, all gone. I was left behind, just like you." The silence grew heavy, both of them sitting with their pain. Kethra whispered, "I lost my mate. The fire took him. I thought it would take me too." Their eyes met, and for the first time, the distance between them felt smaller. 2 different beings, once enemies. Now bound by grief, Daniel poked at the fire, his voice low. "We both lost everything. Maybe that is why we are here now." Kethra turned away, blinking back tears, her chest heavy. The night grew colder. Wind howled through the broken roof. Daniel stood and walked to the entrance, gripping his weapon. He looked back at her. "Sleep, I will guard." Kethra shook her head. "You cannot stay awake forever." But Daniel only gave a small smile, a sad one, and said nothing. She lay down, listening to the soft echo of his steps as he walked the edge of their shelter. Her eyes closed, though her heart still beat fast. For the first time, her dreams were not only filled with fire and screams, but also with the image of a human who stood watch. When morning came, Daniel was already moving, checking supplies. He handed her another piece of food, smaller than before, but enough. She ate slowly, every bite precious. She noticed Daniel ate nothing, and guilt stirred inside her. "You gave me your share," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. "I had enough yesterday." But his eyes told the truth, he was hungry. Kethra looked at the food in her hands, and for the first time she broke it in half, offering it back. Daniel stared at her hand, surprised. Slowly, he took it, his rough fingers brushing hers. "Thank you," he said simply. And she felt warmth. Inside her chest, it was a small act, but it changed something between them. Later they left the warehouse together, moving carefully through the city. Kethra leaned on him when her leg grew weak, and he did not complain. At one corner they froze, soldiers marched by, their boots shaking the ground. Kethra's heart pounded, she wanted to run, but Daniel pressed a hand to her shoulder. He held her still, steady, until the danger passed. In that moment she felt his strength, his calm, his promise to protect. When the soldiers were gone, she whispered, "Why risk your life for me?" Daniel answered, "Because no one should face this world alone." Her breath caught, and she realized something new. This was not just survival anymore, this was a bond forming, fragile but real. As the sun set behind the ruins, painting the sky with fire, Kethra walked beside the human, still afraid, still unsure but no longer lost. The city was broken, the world cruel, but in the heart of ruin, an alien widow and a human survivor began to share more than pain. They shared food, they shared silence, they shared trust. And with that trust came the first spark of a bond that could not be broken. The warehouse had become their small refuge. The walls were cracked, the roof broken, but inside there was warmth. Daniel fixed old blankets as beds. Kethra cleaned her wounds. For a short time, the world outside seemed far away, but danger never stayed far. Rumors spread through the ruined colony, whispers of soldiers searching every district. They wanted supplies, they wanted control, they wanted to crush anyone hiding. Daniel heard the news from passing voices, footsteps and the silence that followed. One night, as the fire burned low, Daniel stood by the doorway, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the dark street. Kethra watched him, fear stirring in her chest. Finally she asked, "What is wrong?" Daniel turned, his voice low. "They are close, soldiers, they are searching this block." Her breath caught, her hands gripped the blanket. "They will kill me if they find me," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "Not if I am here." She wanted to believe him, but her memory screamed louder. She remembered the soldiers who burned her village, who laughed as her mate fell. Her hands shook, her wounds throbbed. Her mind told her to run, to escape before it was too late. Daniel crouched near her, his eyes steady. "Listen to me. If you run, they will see you. You will not survive." His voice was calm but sharp, like steel under fire. Kethra looked at him, searching for any sign of doubt, but he did not waver. He was firm, unshakable. Suddenly, heavy boots echoed outside, the sound of metal armor clashing, the rough voices of men. Kethra froze, her breath stuck in her throat. Daniel pressed a finger to his lips, motioning for silence. The soldiers' voices grew louder, closer. One shouted, "Check the buildings. No one hides from us." The door rattled as a hand tested it. Kethra's heart pounded, her body trembling. Daniel gripped his weapon tight, eyes fixed on the door. Kethra wanted to scream, wanted to flee. But then she saw him standing tall, calm, ready to fight for her. Her fear shifted, not gone, but mixed with something new. Trust. The soldiers moved on, their boots fading into the night. The danger passed, leaving silence heavy in the room. Kethra's shoulders sagged, her breath finally escaping. Daniel lowered his weapon, his face still hard, but his eyes softened when he looked at her. "You, see," he said quietly. "Running would have killed us both." Kethra swallowed, shame burning in her chest. She had doubted him, doubted his strength, but he had been right. Slowly she nodded. "You saved me again." Daniel sat across from her, resting the weapon on his knees. He did not smile, but his voice carried warmth. "We save each other. That is how we survive." His words sank deep into her heart. For so long she had carried the weight of loss alone, now it felt lighter. The next day, danger returned in a different form. While searching for water, Kethra moved too far from the shelter. She bent over a cracked pipe, filling a container. When harsh laughter echoed behind her, 3 gang members stepped out of the shadows, their eyes cruel, their knives glinting. Kethra's stomach twisted. With fear, she stumbled back. One of them sneered. "What do we have here, a wounded stray?" Before they could close in, Daniel appeared, his steps quick, his weapon raised. His eyes were fire, his stance like a wall. "Leave her," he said, his voice low and dangerous. The gang laughed, but their smiles faded when Daniel swung the pipe with deadly strength. The fight was fast, brutal. One man fell with a broken jaw, another with cracked ribs. The last tried to stab Daniel, but Kethra, despite her weak body, threw a stone that struck his head. Daniel finished him with a sharp blow. Breathing heavy, blood on his hands, Daniel turned to her. "You should not be alone," he said firmly. Kethra's hands shook, but her eyes were steady now. "And you should not fight for me alone." He blinked, surprised at her words, then nodded slowly. They walked back to the shelter together. The world outside was cruel, but inside something had changed. Kethra no longer saw Daniel only as a strange human. She saw him as her shield, her partner, her bond. That night, as they sat near the small fire, Kethra whispered, "I thought humans were only destroyers, but you are different." Daniel stared into the flames, his face unreadable. Finally, he said, "Maybe, but even destroyers can choose to protect." The words stayed with her long after silence returned. In this broken world, surrounded by soldiers and gangs, Kethra began to believe in something new, that with Daniel, survival was not just possible, it was worth fighting for. The nights in the ruined colony grew colder. The air smelled of smoke and rust, and the sound of soldiers' boots was never far away. Kethra and Daniel moved carefully through the city, searching for supplies. Food was running low, water even. Lower, Daniel walked ahead, his pipe weapon in hand. Kethra followed close, still limping but stronger than before. She noticed the shadows under his eyes, the way his body moved slower each day. He gave her most of the food, keeping little for himself. She wanted to protest, but the words never left her lips. He was stubborn, and she was afraid of breaking the fragile bond they had. Instead, she carried the guilt in silence. Every bite she took reminded her of his empty hands. That morning, Daniel led them to an old storehouse, its windows broken, its roof half gone. "If we are lucky," he whispered, "there will be cans inside." Kethra nodded, her heart already beating faster. The door creaked as they pushed. It opened inside, dust covered the floor, shelves broken and scattered. But in the back corner, something glinted. Cans untouched. A small treasure in this dying city. Her eyes lit with hope. But the moment was short. A sharp noise echoed from the shadows. The scrape of boots, the click of metal. Kethra froze, and Daniel pulled her back from behind the shelves. 3 soldiers stepped out, rifles ready. "Look at this," one sneered. "A human traitor and a filthy alien." Kethra's blood turned cold, fear gripping her chest. The soldiers raised their weapons, ready to fire. Daniel moved without hesitation. He swung his pipe with fierce strength. The first soldier fell, his weapon clattering to the floor. Gunfire burst in the room, deafening, echoing off the walls. Kethra ducked, her heart racing, the smell of smoke burning her throat. Daniel fought like a man with nothing to lose. He disarmed the second soldier, striking hard, but the third raised his rifle, aiming straight for Kethra. Her breath caught, frozen in terror. A single shot rang out. Daniel threw himself in front of her, the bullet tearing into his shoulder. He groaned, his knees buckling, but he still swung his weapon. The soldier fell, silence crashing down after the storm of gunfire. Kethra's body shook, her eyes wide with horror. Daniel staggered, blood pouring from his wound. He dropped the pipe, his strength fading. She caught him as he fell, her arms trembling under his weight. "Daniel," she whispered, panic choking her voice. His eyes were half closed, his face pale. "Run," he muttered. "Leave me. Save yourself." Kethra shook her head violently. "No, I will not leave you." She dragged him back toward the warehouse, her muscles screaming. Every step was agony, his blood staining her hands. But she did not stop, not even when voices echoed in the distance, not even when fear tried to paralyze her heart. By the time they reached the shelter, Daniel was weak, barely conscious. Kethra laid him on the blanket, her breath fast, tears burning her eyes. She had never cared for another since her mate died. But now, looking at Daniel's broken body, she knew she could not lose him. Her hands shook as she tore cloth into strips. She pressed them against his wound, trying to stop the bleeding. He groaned, his face twisting in pain. "Quiet," she whispered. "You saved me. Now I will save you." She found a small jar of herbs hidden in her pack. Her people once used them to clean wounds, crushing them into water. She pressed the mixture against the cut, Daniel hissed, but did not resist. Hours passed, the fire burning low. Kethra worked without rest, cleaning, binding, holding his hand when the pain grew too much. Her heart ached with every breath he took. She prayed silently, though she had not prayed since the war. At last, his breathing grew steady, his face calmer. Exhaustion hit her, but relief too. She sat beside him, her hand still on his. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not from fear now, but from something deeper. When his eyes opened again, weak but alive, he whispered, "You stayed." Kethra nodded, her voice shaking. "Of course I stayed. I will not let you die." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy with unspoken words. Then Daniel closed his eyes, whispering, "Then we survived together." Kethra leaned against the wall, watching him sleep. Her body hurt, her heart hurt, but inside she felt something new. Not just survival, not just fear, but loyalty. A bond sealed in blood and sacrifice. The world outside was still cruel. Soldiers still hunted, gangs still roamed. But inside that broken warehouse, in the glow of a dying fire, an alien widow and a human survivor had crossed a line they could never step back from. They were no longer strangers bound by chance. They were partners bound by choice. And Kethra knew one truth above all. She would fight for him now, the same way he had fought for her. Because in this ruined world, loyalty was stronger than fear. And together, they still had a chance. The warehouse had grown quiet after Daniel's wound. Days passed in shadows filled with whispered words and careful steps. Kethra stayed close, feeding the fire, watching over him. Daniel healed slowly, his body scarred but his spirit unbroken. But peace was never meant to last. One evening, distant, thunder shook the ground, not from the sky but from boots. The sound of soldiers marching in lines, their voices sharp, their orders cruel. Kethra's heart sank. The danger they had feared was finally here. Daniel pulled himself up, wincing as his shoulder throbbed. "They've found us," he muttered, his voice rough but steady. Kethra's hands shook. "What do we do? Where can we go?" Daniel's eyes narrowed, sharp with focus. There is only one chance, the tunnels. She had heard of the tunnels, old sewer lines beneath the colony, dark, wet, full of danger, but also hidden paths. "Can you move?" she asked, her eyes on his wound. He gave a thin smile. "I can move enough, but we must hurry." The sound of boots grew louder, closer. Torches flickered outside, shadows stretching across the broken walls. Daniel grabbed his weapon. Kethra supported his arm. Together they slipped out the back, every step heavy with fear. The alleys were dark, the air filled with dust. Voices echoed, soldiers shouting orders. Spreading out to search, Daniel led her through narrow paths, his breath ragged. Kethra's eyes darted in every direction, her pulse racing. They reached a broken grate. Half buried in rubble, Daniel pulled it free with a grunt, his wound bleeding fresh. "Go," he whispered, motioning for her to crawl inside. Kethra hesitated, her throat dry. "And you?" "I follow," he said, his jaw tight. "Now move." She slid into the tunnel, the stench of rot filling her lungs. Water dripped from the ceiling. Rats scurried in the dark. Daniel followed, pulling the grate back into place just as soldiers passed above. They crawled forward, the tunnel narrow and cold. Every sound seemed louder in the dark. Every drop of water like a drum, Kethra whispered. "Will they follow us?" Daniel's voice came low. "If they know these tunnels?" "Yes." Her fear grew heavier with each step. But then Daniel touched her arm, his hand steady despite the pain. "We keep moving," he said. "We survive." The words gave her strength enough to keep going. After what felt like hours, they reached a wider chamber. The air was damp, the floor slick with mud. Keithra sat down, her body shaking. Daniel leaned against the wall, pale from blood loss. For a moment, silence filled the space, broken only by the drip of water. Then a sound rose behind them, boots on stone, echoing through the tunnels. Kethra's eyes widened. "They are here." Daniel gripped his weapon tighter, his voice low. "Then we fight or we die." The words cut through the fear like fire. Shadows moved at the far end of the chamber, torches glowing in the dark. Soldiers shouted, rifles raised, their boots splashing in the water. Kethra's body froze. But Daniel stepped forward, his stance firm. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice unshakable. The fight exploded in the dark. Gunfire roared, sparks flashing against stone. Daniel swung his pipe with fierce strength, knocking rifles aside. Kethra, desperate, grabbed stones from the ground, throwing them with wild force. One soldier fell, then another, but more poured in, their shouts filling the tunnel. Daniel groaned, his shoulder bleeding again. His strength fading, Kethra screamed, her voice raw. "No, you will not take him." With sudden courage, she grabbed a fallen rifle. Her hand shook, but her aim was true. She fired, the shot echoing. The soldier fell. For the first time, she was not only the one being saved, she was the one saving. The last soldier fled into the dark, shouting for reinforcements. Daniel staggered, nearly falling, but Kethra caught him. Her chest heaved, her heart wild. "We must move," she whispered. Before more come, they stumbled through the tunnels, every step a battle. At last, a faint light glowed ahead. They pushed toward it, crawling, climbing. Finally, they emerged into the night air, gasping, broken but alive. The city stretched before them, silent and endless. Behind them, the tunnels still echoed with voices. The hunt not yet over. But in this moment, under the cold stars, they had escaped. Kethra leaned on Daniel. Daniel leaned on her. They were both weak, both wounded, but together they had survived. The shelter was gone, the city no longer safe. Now they had only each other. "And the road ahead," Kethra whispered, her voice trembling but strong. "We fight, we run, we live, together." Daniel looked at her, his eyes tired but proud. "Together," he repeated, and with that word, they stepped forward into the unknown. Not as strangers, not as enemies, but as partners bound by fire and blood. The night faded slowly, giving way to the pale gray of dawn. Kethra and Daniel moved through the ruins, their bodies weak, their clothes torn. Behind them, the tunnels still echoed with shouts, the soldiers still hunting. But ahead, in the distance, lay the edge of the colony, the broken wall that led to freedom. Kethra's leg burned with pain. Daniel's shoulder bled through his bandage. Yet they did not stop. Each step pushed by something stronger than fear. The sky glowed with the first colors of morning, soft pink mixed with ash gray. It felt like the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for their choice. They reached a high ridge of rubble, climbing with shaking limbs. From the top they saw the outer wall, tall and broken in places. Beyond it stretched open land, dangerous, unknown, but free. Kethra's heart ached. "We are so close," she whispered. Daniel nodded, his face pale but steady. But then his eyes narrowed. His hand tightened on his weapon. At the base of the wall, soldiers waited. Rifles, ready? Scanning the streets, they had set a trap, knowing the hunted would try to escape here. Kethra's stomach twisted with dread. "There are too many," she said, her voice shaking. Daniel's jaw clenched, his eyes never leaving the soldiers. "Then I will distract them. You will run." Her eyes widened in horror. "No, I will not leave you." Daniel turned to her, his face calm but his voice firm. "If they see us both, they will shoot us both. If they see only me, you can escape." Kethra shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "I will not run without you." For a moment, silence lay between them, heavy as stone. Daniel reached out, his rough hand touching hers. You gave me hope. Again, Kethra. You cared when no one else would, but this is the only way. She gripped his hand tight, her voice breaking. Hope means nothing if I lose you. The soldiers shifted below, their voices sharp, their weapons gleaming in the light. Time was running out, every second a risk. Daniel's eyes softened, a rare warmth in his tired face. Then we fight together, he said quietly. Kethra nodded, her fear turning into fire. She wiped her tears, lifting her chin. For the first time since her mate's death, she was not ready to surrender. She was ready to stand, ready to fight. They crept down the ridge, moving like shadows. Daniel raised his pipe. Kethra held the stolen rifle tight in her hands. Her heart pounded, her palms wet with sweat. But when Daniel glanced back at her, she gave a firm nod. The soldiers turned as they attacked, shouts filling the air. Gunfire roared, bullets striking stone, sparks flying. Daniel swung with fierce strength, breaking through the first line. Kethra fired, her aim sharp, dropping one soldier after another. Chaos erupted. Dust filled the air, the cries of men mixed with the crash of rubble. Daniel groaned as his wound tore open again, but he did not stop. Kethra screamed his name, her voice raw as she fought beside him. They moved like one, human and alien, back to back, refusing to fall. At last, the last soldier dropped, the streets silent except for their ragged breathing. Smoke drifted, the dawn light spilling over broken walls and lifeless ground. Kethra leaned on her rifle, her chest heaving, her eyes searching Daniel's face. He was bleeding, pale but alive. His eyes steady, they staggered toward the wall, climbing the rubble. Every step was agony, but hope pulled them upward. At the top, Kethra looked back one last time. The colony lay in ruins, a place of pain, of hunger, of death. She turned her face to the land beyond, wide and open. The air was harsh, the road uncertain, but it was theirs to choose. Daniel reached her side, his hand gripping hers. Together, they stepped down the other side. As the sun rose, painting the sky with fire and gold, Kethra felt something she thought was gone forever. Not just survival, not just fear, but life itself. The human beside her had given her that gift. Daniel looked at her, his voice low but certain. We are not done. Not yet. Kethra nodded, her heart strong, her eyes shining with new strength. Not done, she agreed. We live, we fight, we make a future. The words carried across the empty land, and so, an alien widow and a broken soldier walked into the dawn. Two lost souls who had found each other in the ruins. In a galaxy that did not care, their bond became their shield, and together they proved a truth no war could erase. Humanity's greatest power was not destruction, but the choice to protect. And in that choice, Daniel had saved her, and she had saved him. Their story was not over. It was only beginning, and with each step into the unknown, they carried hope, stronger than fear.